Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here. So this is Math Guide 1.1 because it's a extension of the Math Guide 1 where I want to address some stuff like Ayato versus Yelan because I think there are people saying that it's not correct, and I will share why I'm doing this. I will just address the whole Ayato versus Yelan thing. I mean it's a loud minority scenario, but it's okay. It's okay. I will address and I'll show the proper figures by splitting Yelan Solo Figures into Single and AOE, so that you guys can appreciate. And I'll also do a comparison against Ayato Solo DPS, we'll do a TLDR, and I'll talk about what's next in the Yelan video series, which pretty much doesn't change because I have not had the chance to do the Math Guide 2 because I'm doing this Math Guide 1.1 right now. Okay, but it's okay. Let's talk about it. There are some feedback saying that Ayato is AOE, Yelan is single, comparison is unfair, so let me address that. There's two main points I'll talk about here. Why is an objective analysis in terms of bias? What this means is that there is no bias here. Okay? When I do the analysis of Ayato versus Yelan, there's no bias here. I don't hate Ayato. And if I don't hate Ayato, why am I comparing Ayato versus Yelan? I'm surprised I'm getting so much feedback on this because okay, it's not loud feedback, it's more like loud feedback. Honestly, this should not become as a surprise. Even during Ayato math guides, I've been talking about this. But it's okay, I'll talk more about this later. Okay, so first off, let's talk about why I say there's no bias. Yeah, it's long because I have to make sure I need to clarify what is going on. So first off, I do not hate Ayato. Okay? I'm still using him alternately with a Hutao com recently on stream. You just join my Twitch stream, you'll see. And the only reason why I'm using the Hutao com is really to refresh my memory of Hutao in preparation for Yelan. And just so you know, okay, even after listing his pros and cons, mainly his cons, right? The cons that I said I'm not happy with in the Ayato summary, I spent almost 40 fragile resins farming 4 echoes for him, plus 4x daily resin refills for 4 echoes. I'm still gonna continue to farm. Okay, typo here. I'm still gonna continue to farm 4 echoes for him, at least for another 1 to 2 weeks. Although I did do Ruin Serpent recently for BP mission. In case you go to my Twitch stream and you see that I'm not doing 4 echoes, I'm doing Ruin Serpent. It's because that's for the BP mission. 10 bosses every week. Simple as that. I also increased his Q level to level 9 even after the cons I've listed. If I really hate the character, you think I'm gonna invest so much? I could have used that 40 fragile resins to do a lot more other stuff. Especially farming, say, something like better Crimson Witch pieces for my Hutao. And not to mention, the 4 Echoes artifact domain is a very resin inefficient domain. Okay, I actually don't recommend FOP players to farm that domain because you just don't get value for your resin. It's just that I know that Ayato does better with 4 Echoes and that's why I'm farming it for him. So how am I hating a character if I'm willing to invest this amount in him? Now, before you say it's for the sake of content, I've already moved on to doing Yelan Math Zeros content-wise. Even if I do a 4 Echoes comparison video after I get a decent enough or a strong enough 4 Echoes set, you really think I'm gonna do this level of investment just for one comparison video? Especially if I hate the character? That's if I hate the character, okay? Like I said, I don't hate the character. But imagine if you're me, I hate the character. Do you seriously think I'm going to spend this amount investing on the character just for one video? Are you serious? Okay, so let's get that straight. I don't hate Ayato. Next, listing his pros and cons post-release to me is like doing a check against all the math series I did for him. So I am going to give you my honest feedback on things I've discovered from actually playing him, things that I can't discover from math analysis alone, things that I only really feel after playing him and testing his rotations repeatedly. Example, his boring long Q animation. You really feel it when you're testing the rotations repeatedly. Okay, that much I can tell you. So am I not allowed to give honest feedback now? Do you not want me to give you honest feedback after I have actually played the character to tally against all the math guides that I've done for that character? For all the new 5-star characters? Because I think it's my responsibility to do so. Especially after doing 13 math guides for Ayato. Who do you think is most disappointed that he has those cons that I mentioned? Think about the time spent preparing those 13 math guides. Just think about it. So Ayato's damage is still as per the math I shared. The cons are not about his damage figures, not at all. So I don't think I've oversold him only or overhyped him only to talk about his cons after. Because I'm really disappointed and upset someone said that. That's why you see me talking so long about this as well. In the first place, early in the Ayato math guides, I've already said that his S tier only if you look at his E. A tier overall. I compared even not just the S tier, I even talk about doing different type of rotation. I gave you 3 different type of permutation, I remember when I compared against Ito. So I don't know why I'm getting comments saying that I'm overhyping or overselling a character. When early in the math guides already told you that this S tier at E, A tier overall, which pretty much tallies with my summary as well. So that's that. Okay, let's establish this. I do not hate Ayato. Then in that case, why am I comparing Ayato versus Yelan? So in my last few Ayato math guides, I've already mentioned that I will be comparing Ayato versus Yelan. This should not come as a surprise to anyone. Even before he was released. Even before I mentioned Ayato's pros and cons after actually playing him. I already said that I will be comparing Ayato versus Yelan. Why? And the reason is simple. They are the new 5-star characters that are back to back. Both of them are Hydro. Thus, there's a case to compare them to decide to put on the Ayato banner or wait to the Yelan banner. In fact, I even recommended to hold on pulling for pulling for Ayato before my Yelan math guides are out for comparison. If you remember when I was talking about whether to pull for Ayato. I have not even gone into an actual comparison on their roles right now. Okay, the current comparison in Math Guide 1, Yelan Math Guide 1, was simply to give an idea of where Yelan stands. That's it. I have not even talked about whether it's a main DPS or sub DPS role or whatever else that can be covered. And let me clarify one more thing. I have never said that Ayato's damage is bad. His damage is good, and that's what makes Yelan broken in comparison. His constellations are bad in value, not his damage, which again I have highlighted in Math Guides before he's released. I also highlighted a point against Yelan in the Math Guide 1, which is that she can't gain anything from attack buffs. So it's not a one-sided comparison. I already told you guys that in Math Guide 1, she won't be able to gain anything from attack buffs. So when it comes to a full team comp, the percentage boost of a damage that she can get from buffs in the team versus Ayato's buff in the team is going to be very different. And I'll cover that when I touched on the actual comps, right? Now, the most important thing, why did I compare single target versus AOE? This is something I do feel sorry about. I should apologize for this because Ayato didn't really feel like AOE character to me when I was using him to clear the current abyss, which right around the meta has more bosses than mobs. Take for example the 2 pyro letters in Plothole. You can't pull them, they don't move, and because Ayato's slashes, right, the way it's set up is 2 slashes that are wide but not far, along with a 3rd slash that's far but not wide, and also not that far, honestly speaking. Ayato can't hit both of them at the same time. So he honestly didn't feel like an AOE character to me. So I may have missed that and I apologize. And that being said, obviously there's no denying that he has AOE on his slashes. So to help make the comparison fairer, I will split Yelan's damage into her single and her AOE for comparison. Okay, so let me try to make the damage comparison fairer. I know people want me to compare against Xingqiu, but think about it. If she does better than Ayato, why would she not do better than C6 Xingqiu? Right? And in order for me to compare against Xingqiu, I need to do up the entire new set of math for Xingqiu. It's a lot of effort involved. Okay? I don't have the math previously done. But for Ayato, I have 13 math guides done. Tons of material, tons of figures for me to do a easy, fast comparison for you guys to appreciate Yelan. Simple as that. Okay, now that we have addressed this, alright, one more point here. If you want to argue with me further on like whose AoE is bigger, right? I'm not going to entertain that further. Okay? Because I can also say that Yelan's AoE can travel far, can be aimed, etc. It's a never-ending debate, which I am not interested in at all. Okay? Arguing or winning a debate on the internet is the most pointless thing ever. I'd rather spend time with my baby. I'll be honest with you guys. Alright, now that we have addressed this, let's look at the split between Single and AoE for Yelan's damage versus Ayato's. So Yelan Solo Figures split into Single and AoE. First we look at the figures. So this is C0, both of this is C0, this is the single target damage, this is the AoE total damage. R1, R5, and this is the percentage spread. 59% here means that out of her total damage that she does in a rotation in C0, at C0, 59% of it is single target, 41% of it is AoE. So she's not 100% single target character. Okay? Now, obviously, there are some variations with regards to percentage, and I'll address them later. And this is the damage figure, this is the rotation. You'll see that the percentage is the same, which is to be expected anyway. Wait, sorry, this should be 23. Typo. No worries, it is divided by 23. Okay, so from the above, I hope that looking at the spread between the Single and AoE, the percentage spread, you'll see that although she has more damage in Single, she's not 100% single target character. Okay, her single target damage makes up 56 to 59% in general, while it's at 70% at C2 because C2's additional arrow is a single target. Okay, C2's additional arrow is a single target, as far as I know based on the description, based on how it works. So let's compare against Ayato next. Okay, first off, we see the figures of Yelan between her Single and AoE. Now, we also see the percentage spread. You know that she's not a full single target character. She does have quite a significant amount of AoE in her damage, overall damage contribution, in terms of ratio. Let's look at comparison against Ayato Solo DPS. Okay, so now I have split the Single and AoE. We have the both AoE and Single here. This is the original figure that we compared for Ayato previously. We have the Single figure as well as the AoE figure. And this is Ayato's total damage. This is the percentage. So this is the original percentage. Remember the 27 and 65% I was talking about. Now you see some red figures here, so things are getting interesting, right? We have an interesting comparison to look at here because the first pair of columns is the total solo. All of this is the same as Mistsplitter 1, I'm not going to talk about them. But once we split Yelan's figure into Single and AoE, so your second pair of columns here, Single, third pair of columns here, AoE. The figures are obviously going to be red. In fact, it's surprising that there's a figure that's not red. But anyway, think about this, right? If I split Yelan's damage into Single and AoE and the figures, if they are not red, she's not just broken, okay? She is gonna break the game completely. Because it's way too ridiculous if that happens. The key comparison here is how big is the difference? Right? How big is the difference? So for C0, let's look at C0 first, okay? This area. Looking at her AoE damage is 45 to 47% worse off than Ayato. Not surprising, correct? But her damage is not just AoE, she has single target damage as well, and her single target damage is 21 to 24% worse than Ayato, after I split them into two different figures. So how do we appreciate this difference? Versus one target, it's pretty straightforward that Yelan does better. 27% better. Versus two targets, it's Yelan's 25.9k versus Ayato's 28.6k. How is this figure derived? It's very, very simple. We just multiply the number of the AoE, we multiply the AoE damage figure by the number of targets plus the single damage for Yelan. For Ayato, it's simply this figure multiplied by the number of targets, since all his attacks are AoE, right? So, Yelan is worse off by 9.5% when it's versus 2 targets at C0. But I will tell you guys that this is a good result. Why? It only falls off by 9.5% versus Ayato's pure AoE damage, which is really good for a character that has more damage in single than AoE. So let's look at this concept next to understand why I say it's good. This is called a diminishing returns of AoE in a 4-man team. One thing about AoE is that you need to always remember that it's very dependent on the number of enemies you are facing to get the value out of the AoE damage. And Genshin has 4 characters in your team. That's one thing to remember. As enemies die, AoE gets diminishing returns, right? I mean, once you clear off all these small mobs, you only left with one single target. Your AoE is no longer there. It doesn't have any advantage versus a single. So, your other 3 characters in the team should have enough AoE to clear the small mobs, allowing you to focus on the big ones or the stronger ones with your main DPS. Now, you can say that the other characters also helps an AoE character like Ayato, and that's absolutely true. But it's a diminishing return. Think of it this way. If the other characters already clear the other mobs with their AoE, Ayato's AoE is not going to have much of a difference versus single, right? Because you're not really hitting enemies with your AoE, you're just hitting one guy, for example. A bigger guy. So for example, if you're fighting like Lawacha together with 2 Hilichers, for example. If the other characters, instead of other characters clearing the mobs with their AoE, if they bring the other mobs down low enough, such that Yelan's AoE, remember, she has about 40+% of AoE in her entire kit, in her entire damage. She's not a full 100% single character. So if Yelan's AoE is enough to clear them, coupled with your other character's damage, again, the whole AoE versus single advantage is not there. Okay, can you appreciate what I'm trying to say here? Yelan is not a full single target character like Yoimiya, thus the whole single versus AoE argument is honestly not that strong for her. Of course, if your AoE damage across your 4-man team is not high enough to take down the mobs, then a pure AoE character like Ayato is definitely better. But I would think that warrants a look into improving your other team members' AoE damage if that's the case. I'm serious. You should really look at that, if that's the scenario. Now, to be honest with you guys, right, this is the reason why I don't like to use math to compare AoE versus single, because it doesn't provide as accurate as a view. This whole diminishing returns concept is the reason why I don't like to compare AoE versus single. If you notice so far in my math, I almost never compare AoE versus single in terms of math, because it really doesn't provide as accurate as a view as you would think if you only look at figures. Because when you look at the AoE and you just multiply it by the number of enemies, you're not taking this into consideration at all, and this is something that will happen while you are playing the game yourself. Against a 100% single target character like Yoimiya, you can also argue to say, yeah, this applies, because you know she's 100% single target. Only scenario that diminishing returns apply is when your other characters clear the mobs with their AoE without Yoimiya's contribution, which you can still contribute with a Q, by the way. So I would say a character that does high damage overall and yet at the same time does decent AoE damage in the kit too is better than a character that's just pure AoE but lower damage. Lower doesn't mean bad, okay? Especially given the diminishing returns of AoE I've mentioned earlier. So I hope this concept is clear, because this is not a new concept I've cooked up recently or something. It's something I always had in mind. I don't know whether, I'm sure someone else in the community must have talked about this before. Because whenever I use Bandit plus Kazuha, when I set up their Qs and Es, right, it always helps to clear the smaller mobs, or bring them low enough for me to notice this. It really is. And this is just 2 characters. I've not talked about the 4th character as well, or the 3rd character as well. So yeah, this is the reason why AoE is not as big of a factor as you think it is. I mean, it's important, but it's not as big of a factor as the current focus on it is, right? The focus is a bit too much on it right now, if you ask me, to be honest. But that's my opinion. Maybe you feel differently. Maybe you really are in a scenario where your AoE damage across your other team members is not high enough to take down the mobs. You really enjoy and appreciate a pure AoE character like Ayato. Then by all means enjoy the character, right? Why do you need to be upset if I do a comparison against Yelan? And right now, I'm even splitting it to single and AoE for you. Okay? Now let's look at C6 comparison. For C6, looking at her AoE damage, is 22 to 24% worse off than Ayato. But again, her damage is not AoE, she has single as well. And look at her single target damage. It's actually minus 2% to 1% compared to Ayato, which means at C6R1, it's only 2% worse off than Ayato. At C6R5, it becomes 1% better than C6R5 Ayato. That's really crazy, okay? Take a moment and think about this. What this means is that her single target damage is almost on par with Ayato's total damage. While on top of that, she does AoE damage as well. That's 22 to 24% worse than Ayato's total damage. Let that sink in for a moment. Now, let's look at versus targets. You'll notice that there's a lot more lines here, a lot more number of targets here, because I generally stop the moment Ayato damage is better than Yelan in this type of comparison right now. So one target is 65% better, Yelan, versus two targets is 54k versus 43.2k. So Yelan still does better by 25.2%. You have 70.4 versus 64.7, so Yelan still does better by 8.7. Versus 4 targets, she still does better, although it's only 0.5%, so arguably you can say it's about the same. Versus 5 targets, Yelan is worse off by 4.4%. Wow. It takes 5 targets of 5 enemies for Ayato, a pure AoE character, to deal more damage than Yelan, who does a mix of single and AoE. Do you see how the single versus AoE target kind of comparison here is not as strong? This argument is not as strong for someone like Yelan, who does a mix of both. For her, whose AoE is a decent enough percentage of her DPS. And if you factor in the diminishing returns of AoE, because it applies here as well, even if you need a lot more targets for Yelan to do worse than Ayato, if you factor in the diminishing returns of AoE, Yelan is really broken, even compared against Ayato, especially at C6 versus C6. At C0 versus C0, it's not so bad. There are some cases where you can say that Ayato is definitely better. There are some cases where you can say Yelan is better. But at C6 versus C6, I can tell you it's overwhelmingly in favor of Yelan. You now will see why I say she's a lot more worthwhile investing Constellations in versus Ayato. But, wait for my com video for more updates. Because when I do the specific comms, the figures might change a little. Or may change a lot. I don't know until I do them. I don't have the time to do every single thing before I do any videos. Okay? Even for C0, I would say she's still performing very well, being only 9.5% behind a pure AoE character versus 2 targets. I mean, for a single plus AoE character to only be 9.5% behind a pure AoE character at 2 targets at C0, it's still a very, very good performance. Because it's not like the case where it's half the amount of DPS. You know what I mean? When you want to compare a single versus AoE, it drastically drops the amount of damage that single character is doing. Because you're basically trying to multiply the AoE character by 2, while single remains 1. But yet, it's only 9.5% behind. Okay? Remember the diminishing returns factor that I talked about, which is pretty dependent on how your other team members are performing in your comp. Okay? Okay, now this point in red here, because I want to make sure that it's clear, I don't want to be accused of overhyping or overselling a character. Okay? One important thing to note is that the current figures assume 140 ER with Raiden for Yelan. she will likely require higher than 140 ER without Raiden, so that will affect her DPS as well. Please bear that in mind. And I'll cover the worst case scenario of 200 ER in the artifact comparison video because it ties in with the 4 emblem. The 200 ER for 4 emblem can change the result of the artifact comparison for 4 emblem versus the other type of artifact combinations, which is why I wanted to do this in the artifact comparison video itself. Okay, so let's go on to TLDR. First off, please refer to a specific section on why Ayato versus Yelan because I don't want you to be out of context. Next, splitting Yelan into a single and AOE damage. At C0 versus 2 enemies, Yelan's damage starts to be lower than Ayato, but it's only by 9.5%. Considering diminishing returns on AOE, I'll say that's a pretty good result. In fact, a really good result for a character that has both single and AOE damage. Please refer to the earlier session on diminishing returns. Let me just correct this, on diminishing returns on AOE for the details on what this means. At C6, only at 5 enemies does Yelan's damage fall off against Ayato by 4.4%. Which means at 4 enemies or less, even multiplying both the AOE damage by the number of enemies, Yelan still does more than Ayato. It's really broken. Honestly, if it continues like this, if there's no further changes to Yelan that nerfs her damage, this is really broken if you consider it in this way. But okay, to be fair, this is a wheel territory. This is C6, right? But I am comparing C6 Yelan versus C6 Ayato too. So, but honestly, she's a waifu character. She's Liyue based, so yeah, I don't think I need to say any more than that. So let me repeat this again. Even though I just say it here, highlighted in red, I'm going to repeat this again. Her DPS figures may change if we increase her ER without Raiden, and I'll cover that in the next video. And I will also revisit the ER requirements for each com eventually when we do video for each com. So like for example a Plothole com or a Taser com for Ayato. When I do those specific comms, we have the specific energy generation from all the individual characters, then we can talk again about the ER requirements. Okay? So I hope you guys can appreciate why I cannot upfront tell you and confirm the ER that's required, why I need to do the math for each of the com first, and how much time that takes. That's why I will ask for your patience until I'm able to publish those videos. Now, next, Yelan video series. So next up, obviously, as per what I've shared in Math Guide 1, is going to be artifact comparison, and I'll cover the 200% ER scenarios as well. And we have team call and rotations after that, weapon comparisons as well, and more. So let me know in comments if there are any specific math you would like, and I'll see if it can be done. And even better is if you join me over on Twitch, where I answer almost every question there, and you can also tell me about specific math you want to see there too. It's easier for me to notice or take note of it. Yeah, because I'm not always able to look at every single comment. And what is more upsetting is that the few times that I look at a comment, I happen to look at comments that are saying that I oversell or overhype a character, which is really disappointing. Alright, so this is my Twitch link. Do join me if you can, and the Twitch link is also in the description. So if you like the content, remember the video and please subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.